primary versus secondary sources for Political Science 3360 International Relations. So why does it even matter whether a source is primary or secondary? For a few reasons. First of all, whether you use a primary or secondary source indicates how your information has been filtered. And also, sometimes your professor just requires you to find both, so you need to know which is which. So let's start with this. What is a primary source? Now, the quality of the source has nothing to do with whether something is a primary source. How much you use the source in your work also has nothing to do with whether something is a primary source. A primary source is first-hand evidence about an event, person, place, etc. Here are some qualities of a primary source. They're usually created by witnesses or recorders who experience the events or conditions that are being documented, and they're often created at the time when the events or conditions are occurring. The main benefit of using a primary source is that it's free of outside analysis or hindsight. So let's talk about some examples of primary sources. It's important to remember that primary sources are not restricted to certain formats. Any piece of information could be a primary source if it satisfies the qualities of the definition. That being said, here are some common formats that are often primary sources. You can pause the video and read the list if you want. It's a whole lot of stuff. But I just want to highlight these particular formats. Since this is for an international relations class, I think that these formats will be the primary sources that you'll often seek. So if you want to pause and take a look at those are good examples of what to look for this class in primary sources. Now, it's important to remember also that primary sources do not have to be used in their native formats. Print or digital, anything is acceptable. So for example, if you're using a speech as a primary source, whether you listen to that speech in person, listen to a recording of it after it happened, or read like a transcript of the speech, they all count as a primary source. Same for government documents. Whether you use the original printed version or the online digital version, it's the content that counts. It's not the format that matters, it's the content. So we talked about primary sources. Let's talk about secondary sources and how those are different. So what is a secondary source? A secondary source is an account or an interpretation of events that are created by someone without firsthand experience. They describe, discuss, interpret, comment on, analyze, evaluate, or summarize primary sources. They're created after an event has occurred. You need that time to be able to analyze and think about an event or something, and you need hindsight. The main reason you want to, or the benefit of using a primary source, is that you receive information along with someone else's perspective, opinions, and knowledge. That can be useful to you also. So, we talked about primary and secondary sources, what they are. Let's talk about them side by side and how they're different. So primary sources are created by someone with first-hand experience. Secondary sources are created by someone analyzing primary sources, so without first-hand experience. Primary sources have no outside analysis of the event or thing being documented. In secondary sources, you receive the information along with someone else's perspective, opinions, and knowledge. Here are the advantages of using each. For primary sources, the advantage is that you get to form your own opinions and draw your own conclusions, just based on the facts, the information that's there. With secondary sources, the advantage is that you get to expand your understanding or interact with someone else's response to an event. So they both have their advantages. Well, let's make sure we understand the difference between primary and secondary sources with a few examples. So here's one example. This is a book. It's the autobiography of Benjamin Franklin. That means he wrote it himself while he was alive. Let's think about it. Is it a primary source? You can pause the video if you want to think. But here's the answer. Yes, it's a primary source because it's written by the person it's about, straight from the source. This is first-hand information. It's also free of outside analysis. Benjamin Franklin talks about himself as he sees him. He doesn't include other people's opinions of him. Let's try a different example. This book is called The Americanization of Benjamin Franklin by Gordon S. Wood. It was published in 2005. Is this a primary source? You can pause the video if you want to think about it. But the answer is no, it's not a primary source. And here are the reasons why. It's because it's not written by the person that it's about. It's written using others' primary sources, and the outside analysis of Benjamin Franklin's life is the point. You don't get outside analysis or opinions with a primary source. So this is a secondary source. Let's try a trickier example. We have two articles here. The one on the left is a front page news article from the Times of London. It was published the day after the vote on the Brexit referendum, and it just talks about the results of the vote and what it could mean for the future. The article on the right is about Brexit proceedings from a think tank, the Brookings Institution, which was published on January 31st, 2020, and it talks about what's happened so far and what that could mean for the future. So, which is the primary source and which is the secondary source? You can pause the video if you want to think about it, but here are the answers. The news article is the primary source because it comes from the time when things happened. It's just talking about, all right, here are the results of the Brexit vote. The article on the right is the secondary source because time has passed. The author here is analyzing what Brexit means and what it could mean and what has happened since. There's a benefit of time to form different opinions and more complex thoughts about Brexit. All right, so I hope now you have a better understanding of the difference between primary and secondary sources. If you have questions about primary or secondary sources, I'm Angela. The other librarian for your class is Jacob. Our email addresses are on the page. You can email us, or if you go to your class research guide, the address is on the bottom of the screen. You can contact us there as well. We'd love to help you figure out the difference between primary and secondary sources. If you have general questions about using the library, our contact information is on the bottom of the screen. You can call us, text us, or you can ask us at the website listed on the bottom right. Thanks for watching.